When Bishop Marvin Sapp took the pulpit and boldly criticized Christians involved in Greek organizations, the shockwaves were immediate. The line between tradition and truth, faith and fraternity, suddenly became a battlefield. But no one was ready for what happened next. Pastor William Murphy, known for his fearless worship and unshakable voice, didn't just push back. He came with fire, defending not just himself, but an entire generation of believers caught between culture and conviction. This isn't just a church disagreement, it's a full-blown spiritual clash that's forcing pastors, pews, and people to pick a side. Is being part of a Greek organization compromising your Christian walk? Or is this just another example of outdated religious judgment trying to suppress modern faith expression? What Pastor Murphy said has everyone talking, and what it reveals about the future of the Black church will leave you stunned. Buckle up, because this conversation is bigger than anyone expected. The church has weathered many debates, but few have sparked as much raw emotion as the latest clash between two spiritual giants, Bishop Marvin Winans and Pastor William Murphy. When leaders of this caliber find themselves on opposite sides of the altar, it sends shockwaves far beyond the sanctuary. And this time, the battleground isn't politics or doctrine, it's Greek life. A storm is brewing over whether Christians can pledge to fraternities and sororities without compromising their faith. And trust me, this one hits deep. It all began when Bishop Winans took the mic and boldly declared that allegiance to Greek organizations might amount to spiritual idolatry and unholy covenants. The congregation sat frozen, but the internet ignited with outrage, debate, and disbelief. Then came the thunder. Pastor William Murphy stepped in with a fiery, unfiltered response that didn't just refute Winans, it shook the very foundations of church culture. He called out the hypocrisy, the generational gatekeeping, and the way traditional leadership often alienates young believers who proudly wear both their letters and their faith. This isn't just a disagreement, it's a cultural reckoning. And you're about to hear both sides like never before. And don't assume that this is just another religious argument. Deep discussions concerning identity, church culture, tradition, and the continuous conflict between traditional holiness and contemporary Christian expression have been sparked by this conflict. It's more than just a discussion. This is a serious reckoning. You'll be shocked by what has been revealed, what has been spoken, and who else is covertly siding. Because lines are being drawn, even though the majority of churchgoers are attempting to maintain their objectivity behind the scenes. We must go back to the instant Marvin Winans struck the match in order to comprehend this escalating firestorm. Bishop Winans' Sunday sermon at Perfecting Church, his church in Detroit, deviated from what some believe to be a standard discourse on spiritual allegiance and consecration. However, his subsequent remarks swiftly descended into scandal. How can you pledge to Alpha, Kappa, Omega, or Delta, and still pledge allegiance to the cross? You can't serve two masters. That's not fellowship, it's idolatry, Marvin Winans said sharply, and the assembly froze. A few gave silent nods, not sure if they completely agreed. Others just sat silently in shock. However, one thing was evident. This was not merely a whimsy. A theological line was being drawn in the sand by Winans. Furthermore, it wasn't the only instance. Marvin Winans has a history of questioning contemporary religious manifestations, particularly when it comes to younger generations embracing practices that deviate from conventional Pentecostal holiness. As those who have followed him over the years are aware, his remarks were more than religious this time, though. For many, they were personal. The truth is that sororities and fraternities have a long history in the Black community. In addition to providing leadership development and social support, Divine Nine groups such as Alpha Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, and Omega Psi Phi have been at the forefront of civil rights, community activism, and even religious leadership for many years. Numerous worship leaders, pastors, and bishops take pride in belonging to these groups. Therefore, Marvin Winans did more than just tread on toes when he implied that being a part of Greek life may compromise one's spirituality. He trampled on traditions. He didn't stop there either. He went on to caution that far too many members of the church today are more devoted to chants, colors, and cries than they are to Jesus' blood. He maintained that these associations encourage covert rites, misdirected devotion, and a fraternity that takes the place of the Christian connection. His sermon raised the question of whether Christians who were active in Greek society were allowing evil spirits to exist in the guise of custom. At that point, social media took off. When snippets of his sermon were made public online, Thousands of comments were left, expressing both outrage and encouragement. His audacity was commended by others, who claimed he was only urging the church to return to its holiness. Others charged him as being outdated, contemptuous, and unfairly disparaging Black culture while neglecting the church's own shortcomings. However, nobody anticipated what happened next. The gospel world would be rocked by what William Murphy, a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi himself, had to say next. Bishop Marvin Winans' lecture sparked an instant and fierce protest, particularly among Christians who take pride in both their Christian faith and their Greek ancestry. Pastor William Murphy, the third, a well-known worship leader, senior pastor of the Dream Center Church of Atlanta, and a longtime member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, was the one whose response carried the most weight and fire. Murphy is well known for his hits, including Praise Is What I Do and It's Working, and is well liked in both traditional and charismatic church circles. However, he wasn't singing this time. His voice was distinct, powerful, and unapologetic. Murphy responded on his Instagram Live with a straightforward, emotionally charged statement that left no room for misunderstanding. Only days after Wine's widely shared sermon video started making the rounds online. "Dear Bishop Winans, we are not your enemies, but we will defend our callings," was the caption he posted. You could see Murphy was both upset and frustrated right from the start of the live feed. "You cannot demonize what you don't understand," he said at the outset. "I honor Bishop Winans. He's a father in the faith, but I can't stay silent while an entire generation of leaders and believers is dismissed because of ignorance and fear." He continued by saying that his membership in a Greek group did not in any way diminish his religious beliefs. Indeed, it influenced it. "I learned discipline, leadership, and community service from Kappa Alpha Psi. I remain faithful to Christ despite those ideals. They help me better serve Him." Murphy's voice broke as he bemoaned the way that Black Greek life, a vital component of African American education, progress, and even spirituality, is sometimes distorted or demonized in religious contexts. "How are you going to convince me that the brotherhood that taught me how to serve others and helped me overcome prejudice on my college campus is evil? That isn't a holy thing. That's dangerous." Murphy, however, did more than just defend himself. He broadened the perspective by pointing out a trend that, in his opinion, is seriously harming the Black church's ability to remain relevant to younger generations. "Our children are leaving the church because of this, because we condemn them rather than accept them when they enter the room with letters on their chest, ink on their arms, or cultural experiences that we were not exposed to as children. We blame them. We then question why they never return." Murphy vehemently declared, "I'm not less anointed because I'm a Kappa," in a particularly viral moment. "And when I walked those flaming dunes, the Holy Ghost remained with me." That statement went viral on social media. Videos of his remarks went viral on Instagram and TikTok, with many people complimenting Murphy for bridging the gap for a generation that frequently feels torn between culture and purpose. He then changed course and delivered a forceful indictment of church leadership in general. "Let's expose the control, the spiritual manipulation, and the gossip behind the pulpit if we're going to call things out. Let's discuss the covert church alliances that actually ruin lives rather than the ones that assist students finish with honors." Boom! Mic drop. "I love Bishop Winans," Murphy said as he concluded his video with poise and passion. His reaction was not only audacious, but it was also therapeutic for many. "But I love the truth more, and the truth is, we've got to do better. Greek life is not our enemy. Ignorance is." Pastors, choir directors, youth leaders, and Christian students who had been shunned or humiliated because of their Greek ties started to share personal accounts of how their groups aided in their intellectual, emotional, and spiritual development. Some traditional leaders doubled down, warning that Murphy's response was an attempt to justify compromise and blur spiritual lines. One Delta Sigma Theta member commented, "William Murphy gave us language for what we've been feeling for years. We love Jesus and we love our sisterhood. That doesn't make us divided, it makes us real." The real storm was just getting started, and as William Murphy's forceful response spread like wildfire across social media, YouTube, gospel blogs, and group chats across the nation, the church community found itself sharply and publicly divided. The discussion escalated from private disagreement to a public theological divide. And guess what? Other gospel voices started to weigh in, but not all of them were supporting Murphy. This was no longer just a Winans versus Murphy debate. as one side celebrated Murphy as a voice needed by a generation fed up with being misinterpreted and policed, while the other side viewed his remarks as a dangerous normalization of secular identity in sacred settings and a startling break from holiness. Old school versus new school, a generational clash across pulpit and panel discussions. This was a battle of generations, ideologies, and definitions of faith itself. Pastors and bishops, particularly those over 50, started to subtly address Murphy's remarks, often without mentioning him by name, and some reaffirmed the idea that the covert rituals of Greek life were incompatible with Christianity. One especially scathing sermon tape emerged from a prominent bishop who said, "You can't wear the cross and the crest." Others cautioned their audiences against mixing oil and water. One never dies. One is man-made. However, seminary professors, youth ministers, and even younger pastors started to protest. One millennial pastor tweeted, "If we can wear police badges, Masonic rings, and college degrees in church, why did we only condemn divine 9 letters?" Others noted that this was about embracing identity and culture without condemnation, rather than pledging allegiance to an organization over Christ. Whether Black Christian culture has become so gatekept that it shames anything unexpected or non-traditional was the point of contention, not whether Christ should be at the center. Christian Greek members started posting their own testimonies, explaining how their sorority or fraternity helped them pay for their education through scholarships, taught them the value of community service, promoted leadership and public speaking, linked them to other Christian believers on campus, and led them to Christ through campus ministries and prayer circles. "I found Jesus inside my sorority house, not outside of it," one Zeta Phi Beta member wrote. "During my depression, my line sisters joined me in prayer. Who could claim that God wasn't there?" The podcasts followed. The debate was swiftly taken up by Christian podcasts and religious YouTube panels, which included candid discussions between pastors, theologians, and believers with Greek ties. In its first week, one of the Unfiltered Pulpit podcast conversations received over 500,000 views. "What we're really dealing with is a fear of what we don't understand," a guest pastor stated on the show. "Some leaders are dismissing this generation instead of discipling them, which isn't shepherding, that's spiritual abuse." This sparked even more conversation. Instead of providing mentorship, do some conventional leaders project fear? Does the contemporary church feel more at ease criticizing culture than interacting with it in a compassionate manner? Not just about Greek life, but also about who the church accepts and who it tacitly rejects. Murphy's statement had struck a chord. Here's the cliffhanger though. Some gospel performers who had vowed to support Greek organizations were being instructed behind closed doors to keep their affiliations a secret, particularly if they were slated to perform at conferences, revivals, or gospel award presentations. "My manager literally told me not to post anything with my sorority colors," one musician, who wished to remain unnamed, stated, claimed that it would damage my reputation in the ministry and that this is who I am. The tension was no longer limited to the pews. In the gospel sector, it was having an impact on bookings, branding, and even public visibility. It has been stated that some event planners even thought about removing William Murphy from future lineups out of concern for criticism from more orthodox Christian groups. Murphy, however, was unconcerned and unbowed. "If speaking truth means fewer bookings, so be it. I'm not here for popularity. I'm here for freedom." He redoubled his efforts in a subsequent article, adding, "Just when it seemed like the noise might subside, another gospel giant entered the fray and fueled the flames." The gospel community held its breath in the days after William Murphy's unrepentant retort. Would, like so many contentious church moments before it, this debate end quietly, or would speech be overshadowed by silence? Everyone was surprised by what transpired next. Gospel singers, musicians, and even some pastors gradually started to raise their hands, some timidly, others brashly. There was more to the question than just asking, "Do you support Murphy?" "Where do you stand on the church's place in Black culture?" was the question, and the silent majority might have been afraid of negative reactions. Many of the greatest figures in the industry remained oddly silent. Notable figures such as Smokey Norfolk, Donnie McClurkin, and Tasha Cobbs Leonard did not publicly remark. Not even a like, not a tweet, not a post. And that hush was deafening to the supporters who were paying careful attention. A blogger wrote, "It's wild how gospel artists are quick to speak on Kanye's secular music or LGBTQ+ issues, but the moment it's about our culture, our Black organizations, they freeze." Theories began to circulate. Was it apprehensive about losing church reservations? Did conservative pastors who fund conferences and tours put pressure on it? Others spoke out loud and proudly, while others might not have known where they stood. William Murphy's supporters began to come forward. One of the first people to post something subtle but impactful was gospel singer Kiara Shear, who is a member of Delta Sigma Theta. She posted an old photo of herself at a sorority service event to Instagram, captioning it simply, "Sisterhood Service Saved." The post received thousands of likes. The message was unambiguous. "I'm both and I'm not ashamed." A short while after, well-known gospel singer and Alpha Kappa Alpha member Lexi Allen posted an impassioned commentary video on her YouTube page. She remarked, "People keep forgetting that our pride, our judgment, and the way we treat one another badly in His name are what threaten God, not Greek letters." Additionally, Lexi disclosed that a church had advised her against wearing pink and green while serving, stating that it would convey the incorrect message. I responded, "No, I am the message, and if you're more offended by my colors than by your gossip, that's your problem." In only 48 hours, the video had over 300,000 views, and people flooded the comments section with stories of how they were silenced or embarrassed because of their Divine Nine ties. Support wasn't universal though, as some traditional leaders and artists, mostly older men, began to make subtle barbs without mentioning Murphy by name. One prominent choir director said on social media, "We have singers standing up for idols, but silent when souls are lost. Make sense of it." A longtime gospel veteran also tweeted, "Just because it's black culture doesn't mean it belongs in God's house." These comments sparked a wave of responses from other believers, particularly from younger ones who contended that black Christianity and black culture have always been intertwined, from homecomings at HBCU to civil rights marches to spirituals. You can't separate the communion table from the cookout. One Twitter user wrote, "They're both where we come together." Then the leak started. As the controversy gained widespread attention, behind-the-scenes drama emerged, with anonymous sources revealing that at least two significant gospel events were re-evaluating their invitations to feature William Murphy as the main act. They didn't want to offend more conservative sponsors or churches, not because they disagreed theologically. Murphy's church, the Dream Center, received a ton of calls, both positive and negative, and security reportedly had to step in one Sunday when a visitor tried to confront Murphy during service, saying he was misguiding people. The man allegedly said, "It's not about Greek life, it's about rebellion," before being led away. And Murphy later said, "I'm not at war with the church," in a brief statement. That one sentence sent shockwaves through Christian Twitter once more. "I'm at war with the spirit of fear disguised as tradition." The most surprising development, however, was that Marvin Wynn had yet to publicly respond. His silence started to raise more questions than it did answers. Was he avoiding responsibility, or was he choosing maturity? In any case, people were beginning to question whether he truly believed what he said. Why not stand by it now? By this point, it's obvious that this wasn't just a disagreement between William Murphy and Marvin Wynne. When you take away the surface of Greek life versus holiness, you're really looking at this. Who gets to define what it means to be saved in 2025? And the answer isn't as straightforward as some pastors might like to believe. This became a mirror for the modern black church, reflecting deeper cracks, hidden fears, and long-standing cultural tensions that many have been too afraid to name out loud. There is no longer a one-size-fits-all approach to spirituality. Today's believers, particularly millennials and Gen Z, are not following a strict rule-based model of Christianity. Instead, they're investigating their identities, asking questions, and resisting when tradition begins to feel like sanctification disguised as control. It's a reformation, not a rebellion. William Murphy stood there unapologetic, and his message was that you can be filled with the Holy Ghost and still honor your fraternity, lead worship and still proudly wear your letters, and love Jesus and still be who you truly are. The foundation is changing. This is in stark contrast to a generation of elder church leaders who frequently see culture as a threat to consecration rather than a bridge to connection, fearing that embracing cultural identities will weaken the gospel. As a result of this conflict, churches all over the nation are now having genuine discussions behind closed doors. Should church leaders publicly reveal their Greek ties? Should the church re-examine its approach to cultural expression? Can we have both tradition and change? Some ministries are now holding forums, inviting academics, theologians, and members of the Divine Nine to help their congregations see what Greek life really means beyond the assumptions based on fear. I used to hide my AKA membership at church, but now I wear my pink and green with freedom, said one young woman after Murphy's message went viral. That's the power of moments like this. They change the atmosphere. What we learn from this controversy is that the Black church is changing, and those who don't change with it risk falling behind. Meanwhile, some young Christians who once felt rejected are returning to church spaces where they now feel seen. The era of top-down, unquestioned authority is eroding. The people, especially the youth, are calling for dialogue, not dictatorship. Silence is no longer neutral. Cultural identity does not equate to compromise. Greek life, tattoos, musical preferences, or even fashion choices do not negate someone's salvation. Leaders must pay attention. People are watching and remembering who remains silent, and William Murphy isn't backing down. He concluded his recent sermon at the Dream Center with this: "You don't have to strip yourself of your story to be accepted by God. In the digital age, remaining silent on contentious issues is frequently interpreted as fear or complicity." The congregation sprang up as he said, "He made you, he knew you, and he anointed you, not your imitation of someone else." His message reached well beyond the boundaries of his church.